Hello, my name is Adam, and welcome to Tell Me About Your Game, the podcast where I invite people on to tell me about their tabletop RPG games, their sessions, their campaigns, their characters, their homebrewed worlds. We're talking D&D, Pathfinder, Fate, Powered by the Apocalypse game, Starfinder, Masks, and many others. These people are not celebrities or big industry insiders, they're just people who love a game. If you're playing it, I want to hear about it, and if you clicked on this podcast, maybe you want to hear about them too. This week, I spoke with Aries at Aries_2256 on Twitter about their homebrewed Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition world, Vasha. All right, so we are here in the inaugural episode of Tell Me About Your Game, in which, yes, thank you. Do I have to license that? I'm not sure. I'm new to podcasting. Yeah, right. I guess I'll find out when I get the official letter. And we are here with Aries in their wonderful world.
Hello, hi.
Yeah, hello. This is cheating a little bit because, of course, I have actually played in your world. I wanted to start with somebody that I knew and was familiar with. I know what questions to ask, too, because, I wrote the lore document myself. But
yeah, you wrote more notes than I did.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's how I deal with long-form campaigns.
I actually wrote for this so that I remembered what I was going to say, because brain made of soup, thoughts hard.
Head emptied, just good vibes.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you tell our presumably soon-to-be loyal listening public about yourself and about your game world that you are going to be talking about, just in brief?
All right. Hi, I'm Aries. I use they, them pronouns, hang out on Twitter a lot. I guess I'd be an artist primarily, although there hasn't been a lot of that lately. I'm also a professional Twitter complainer about things.
As are most Twitter users, that's fine.
Yeah, that's just a thing.
And we're hanging out on Discord complaining about Twitter, so I don't know, maybe it's just who we are as people.
Hey, great minds think alike. I'm also here, so, there's that.
Nice.
This is the first homebrew world, and the third one that I've used. It's called Vasha, and it's the one that I've used for almost every game that I've run. I made it back in 2018 when I was first learning how to dungeon and dragon. I haven't been playing for that long.
Okay, honestly, neither have I, so...
There's a lot of things where I'm just like, oh man, I definitely... This is the first world that I made. I sure am going to change that.
First drafts and everything, yeah.
We've gone through some revisions. We've done some patch-up work. 18-year-old me is a completely different person from almost 21-year-old me. It's split into 4 continents or 4 kingdoms, depending on which one you're talking about. And I very much like north, south, east, west.
Yep, that's those are certainly some directions.
Yeah, and each one's sort of for like a different genre of play. It really depends on what I'm working on and what I'm thinking about running in terms of game, where I'll put it. Like, the one that you were in was Iriel in the north, so everything that has to do with dragons goes there. Everything that's steampunky and like future tech, but not quite. All that goes there.
It was a fantastic place to play an artificer. It really I love it very much. Okay, so that's Iriel. I am less familiar with the other continents on Vasha. Can you tell me a little bit about those?
Sure. You know a little bit about the one that's to the far south, Aurora, just because your character basically migrated from there to the north. I guess I'd describe it as being like fantasy Middle East, but not quite, just because it's very hot climate, lots of deserts, lots of tropical areas. I also took a lot of inspiration from Pirates of the Caribbean, so...
Yep.
There's a lot of swashbuckling. That's the one that I've used the least in terms of like actual games, just because I had one, but it got cut a little bit short, just because no D&D campaign goes on forever.
No, and honestly, it never speaks to the quality of the world and what you're doing with it. It's just, some people got to work, people got to play, people got to go to school, and it is, at the end of the day, it's a game. So it tends to be the first thing on the chopping block when your time goes.
Yeah, that one I'm still workshopping some things, but we'll see how it goes in the future. I want to keep it from getting too stereotyped, I guess, because when I
you don't
say
want to do
fantasy
that.
Middle East, I don't want it to come across like I'm just gonna take a bunch of real things from real countries and just slap some fantasy on them.
We want to avoid that.
Yeah.
But I do like the celebration of various worlds. It doesn't always just have to be like your basic European descended sword and sorcery.
Yeah.
I think worlds are bigger than that. They should be bigger.
The next one that I have is a lot more typical fantasy. That's Ayano and Wayleith, which are both connected together. It's just that Wayleith is to the east and Ayano is to the west. One continent. I'm being interrupted by a cat. Ignore him.
I heard a little buddy there. Yeah.
Yeah. That's one continent split into two kingdoms. They kind of hate each other. Ayano is very much like, this is your typical fantasy kingdom. Let's go on an adventure to Hobbit Town. Let's wander around some mountains, hang out with some dwarves. There's some orcs,
Yep.
That's the part that I designed first. You can kind of tell.
Your Greyhawk Middle Earth fair. We met a gentleman, and when we played your game, we met a gentleman who was from Ayano.
Yes, you did. Sir Will.
Sir Will of the Fancy Blade. Cool, yes. No, cool sword Will, I think is what we called him. Yes.
Yeah, guy with a sword that I'm surprised that none of you guys tried to investigate, because there's a guy in the sword and you never talked to him. Damn it.
No, we were surprisingly lawful good there.
Yeah. Surprisingly.
I mean, my character was a student who was coming out of her shell, so she was really too timid to try anything like that. And then we've got a paladin. And then, the other guys are just really, really respectful of boundaries. And, it's weird because it's very unlike any party that I've ever had, which is usually chaos monsters. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm kind of used to that. Yeah, I'm used to the opposite. I'm used to people breaking things and getting into trouble, which is what happens in the games that I run in Ayano, because that's where I run my monster campaign. That's where Malice's Monster Guild is. And generally speaking, the parties that I've run from there are just a bunch of chaotic weirdos who get into trouble.
Well, I mean, I think that, and here's the thing about Iriel, right, was that a lot of the story we were working through was about the breakdown of an existing structure. These guardian dragons who has sort of held sway over the world. They were the protectors of Iriel. Were losing their power, and you could see civilization starting to break down because of all of the things that were happening. So in a lot of ways, we were champions of that structure, champions of that law. So it kind of makes sense for the setting of what Iriel is, I think.
Yeah. Ayano has, I would describe it as magic problems, but that's, it's more like lack of magic working problems. There's a very specific problem that is localized around that country where teleportation doesn't quite work the way that it's supposed to. It doesn't really matter on what scale. Any kind of teleportation magic, even stuff like Misty Step, it tends to go awry because the actual structure of magic there, there's how do I describe it? Basically, there's holes in the curtain between various planes, and there's some mods, and they've been eating at the curtain there. And if you cast magic, there's a really, really high chance that it'll just open holes to other planes of existence. Usually the Abyss, and that doesn't really work very well. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So you're just, low-level monster fight and whatever, you just do a quick Misty Step, and then boom, demons everywhere.
Yeah, though it depends on, it depends on how powerful the spell is. That causes a lot of problems. It makes it really, really hard to get to other continents in any way that's expedient at all.
You gotta go by good old-fashioned ship travel. Yeah, am I correct in thinking that there is a distinct level of technology between Iriel and Ayano, where Iriel is more advanced and Ayano is more maybe a couple hundred behind?
Yeah, and the big problem is that, if you're trying to get from Iriel to anywhere else, Ayano and Wayleith Wayleith are in the way, so you have to go around, so that means the technology has a really hard time getting anywhere. And you can teleport, all the way around, I know, but you can't teleport there and then teleport from there somewhere else. So it just a really big boulder.
Yeah. And it's not like everybody has access to that kind of magic. It's still pretty advanced to be able to teleport between continents.
Yes, and much like in real life, the only people who actually use teleportation in Iano are the rich people who can get away with it.
Okay, all right. I got to put a pin in that because I want to talk about that. That's some class dynamics right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've always got them.
Yeah, the only other place of note would be Wayleith, which has similar problems with magic, but it's also the continent doesn't have a lot of actual civilization on it. It's pretty barren. The only citizens who really live there and have any sort of like established society are Underdarken races who, at some point, an ambiguous amount of time ago, fled from the Underdark to the surface. And no one's really sure exactly why that was the case, but there was some sort of a pre-civilization that was abandoned that they ended up coming up to the surface to habitate in. So, like, old citadels and buildings and crumbling structures. Most of them are pretty nomadic. They'll hang around these areas and they'll just travel between.
They're inhabiting the bones of this former ancient civilization. And you've always got to have the ancient civilization that nobody knows much about.
Yeah, there's a big debate about who the civilization was started by. Basically, there's elves and orcs, and no one can decide which society it was. Although scientific evidence says it was the orcs. It's a hotly contested issue.
And the elves don't like that, yeah?
The elves are not fond of that. Yeah. When things were first starting to really pop off, I guess, there was a lot of contention because the orcs were a lot more willing to travel and explore and trade with other peoples. And the elves, they kind of retreated into the woods and crossed their arms and had a little temper tantrum about that. They're a little bit
haughty and isolationist. Yeah, literally isolationist. Yeah.
Yeah, not haughty per se, but it's very just, I do not want to deal with this. I do not like change. Trees good.
See, I love that because that's like the continent of Wayleith, or the kingdom of Wayleith. That's like two separate campaigns right there that you can do, like to discover why they fled to the surface and to sort of deal with the civilization that was there previously.
Yeah, I've purposefully left this a little bit vague because I'm really bad with details and memory sometimes. So everything that I do, I remember it in the broad strokes. The big important bits, a lot of the little things, I'll just roll with it.
Yeah, I make up tons of stuff in the moment. I've even made up stuff about your world.
And I love that. I like it being contributory like that.
Oh, good. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of my philosophy as a GM as well, is to sort of let the world reflect those who are living in it. I was playing the other day, and I said, not to get into myself or anything, but I was playing with somebody, and they were like, what kind of foods do they serve here? And I said, I made the world, but your character has lived in it and grown up in it, so they'd probably know better than me what's being served here. Or it's like they suggested, I'm going to get some of that famous chicken soup, and then they were like, second guess themselves, like, is there chicken soup on the menu? And I was like, no, yeah, there can be chicken soup on the menu. There can be
imagination.
Yeah, barbecue owlbear, for all for all I know.
Yeah, admittedly, I'm not so creative with the food stuff. So when we were playing, the one thing that I was like, oh yeah, Ariel definitely has this, was like those crappy street vendors where they sell really good food that's also going to destroy your arteries, like fried cheese on a stick.
Yeah. That wasn't even just about the food. That was like very evocative of the sort of place that we were. Highfalutin city, but like with this touristy sort of underbelly there. Underbelly is the wrong word, but like this tourist sort of element.
Yeah,
you know?
there's definitely like some tourist trap areas just because it's like, oh man, the city is built out under the ocean. That's neat. Man, there sure is like a cool structure here. Let's capitalize off of it. Hey, you can't escape capitalism even in D&D.
That's true. I think the unspoken thing about Iriel actually was, and we're back onto Iriel because once again, that's what I know the most about.
Yeah, it's the one I've played the most.
The unspoken thing about Iriel is that it's not just land dwellers. There is also a sizable mer population that lives off the coast. Is that not correct?
Yeah, and they hang around in Maelstrom a lot because it's built out into the ocean, and there's a lot of like community there. But yeah, the merfolk have their own cities under the water, and they actually have quite a lot of technology that they can use to hang out with those walkers up on the surface.
Yep. That's so interesting to me because it's like usually merfolk there's obviously that barrier there where we just can't live in the same environments. So I like the way that you weave those into each other. I thought that was really clever.
Yeah, but I'm coming at this in the logic of like, in the real world, we're so determined to get into space and to explore deep into the ocean, the real human ocean on our Earth, that I'm just like, mermaids with access to magic and technology would absolutely be the exact same way. It's just like, I want to see what's up there. I want to go to a mountain.
I want to be where the people are.
Yeah. Yeah, Ariel was onto something.
I think there's a tendency in games, particularly of like a more medieval setting, where NPCs and stuff are depicted as being sort of cautious and terrified. And it's reasonable because they live in a terrifying world. But I think a lot of that is to encourage the players to be the ones who take these leaps and to feel like the explorer and the hero. I felt like I was one among many when I was there in Iriel. I felt like everybody was doing something, the world was on the move, and you had to jog a little bit to keep up with it. And that's a really cool feeling, and that's not something that I get in a lot of campaigns. A lot of times it's, oh, the little tiny village out in the wilderness is just barely subsisting peacefully, and then goblins attack,
Oh no, Brambletown is under attack by Gobbo Bob. Yeah.
The miller's daughter's gone missing.
This is kind of a thing with all of the games that I run, but they tend to be very anachronistic. Like, there's a lot of things where it's just like, I'm not going to be like, "Thee and thou, Shakespeare, blah 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 blah." I just talk like a normal person, and I just kind of assume that like, these people are used to it because this is the world that they've known forever. So they just kind of roll with it.
Back in the day, "thee and thou" was like the equivalent of "yo bub." So like, they didn't think of it as being floral and purple prose and Shakespearean.
Yeah, I'm not very fruity. I just kind of throw in elements of like things that exist today, but fantasy, because I can't see why they wouldn't have it.
Yeah, there's things that your players understand, and it's a world with magic, and people have always used any kind of technology to get ahead and to sort of change the world around them. Why should magic be any different?
They can summon fire from the sky and teleport and make houses appear out of nowhere, like Mordekainen's mansion and stuff. Why wouldn't indoor plumbing and pens and like a mail system exist?
Exactly. Like, just bewitch a stone with create water. You don't even need indoor plumbing,
Yeah. It's just fun to take a normal thing that exists and just figure out a way to slap some magic on it.
Slap a little magic. And it's a way to quantify your sort of interest in the world around you, where it's not just like, oh, indoor plumbing, boring. It's more like, indoor plumbing, how does that work? That's kind of interesting, actually.
Yeah. Don't ask. I haven't thought about it like sausage. I haven't put that much thought into it.
Well, you know what the thing is the average person, at least the average person that I deal with, knows a lot more about how D&D's mechanics work than how indoor plumbing's mechanics work. So
yeah, I think it works. There.
It checks out. It's all good. So you would say that your setting is pretty high fantasy, yes?
Yeah, but I've never really been able to quantify it when it comes to like Iriel, because it's like there's steampunk in there, there's high fantasy, there's like modern day stuff. If I had to classify it as anything, I'd say it's like gas lamp fantasy.
Ooh, interesting. Okay, yeah. No, I get that. That absolutely makes sense. And I remember, of course, there's the bottled lightning. And how did so the dragons are a big part of Iriel.
Mm-hmm.
major part of Iriel. It's lots of things are based on the dragons. That differs a little bit from the average D&D canon.
Yeah. I actually got my inspiration from two things. One, Storm King's Thunder, which is one of the only like written modules that I've read through. I was like, oh man, there's this whole conflict where like these dragons and giants have this huge history where they hate each other. But I also feel like most of the like D&D campaigns that I've seen, and just in media in general, the dragons are just kind of slotted into like, oh, you have to defeat the dragon. The dragons are the evil ones. And it's like, yeah, but that's kind of boring after a while. Like, you could do it and make it work really well. But
and who doesn't love a dragon? Like, come on.
Dragons are cool, but it's like, if you live for like upwards of 1,000 years, you gotta be pretty smart. You gotta have better things to do with your time and your life than setting villages on fire and eating fair maidens.
Legendarily intelligent creatures, and all they're doing is bumming around and eating sheep.
Yeah, so in Iriel, they worked out a system that's a lot more beneficial for all, and involves a lot less of pitchfork mobs coming after them. It's a symbiotic relationship, because they, because you've seen this in my game, but they guard places like cities and passes through the mountains and areas underwater where they keep their lairs, and in return for a simple promotional deal of 2 monthly tides two yearly tides. They just kind of chill, and people give them free stuff, and in return, all they have to do is just smite anything that vaguely resembles a threat nearby.
Yeah, and that's like basically, I feel like that is in a lot of ways was the sort of basis for a feudal system that actually existed. It was just who controls the military rather than who is a giant flapping fire-breathing monster.
Yeah. And the dragons, they don't communicate with each other a lot, but when they do, it's basically just, stay off my turf, I'll stay off yours. I get these tiny little humanoids to bring me cool things to add to my collection, and in return, we just kind of vibe.
Was that wrought from like historically in your world? Was that wrought from like violence between dragons and violence between humanoids and dragons?
More like the desire to avoid violence. Like when people first started coming to Iriel, basically to colonize it, they realized like, oh, this is an island that's literally overrun with like most of the dragons in the entire world, and they're not evil, so let's not poke the bear. Let's like try and figure something out. And obviously there was some violence, but ultimately they figured they avoided the worst of it by getting it over with and just making some sort of a peace deal.
See, very smart. I imagine there was at least some sort of impetus to that, where somebody said, okay, well, this is going to spiral out of control for a really long time if we don't get a handle on this.
Yeah, I do have his name. I do not have it written down right now, but there is a guy. He has a holiday named after him. I believe his name is Arkin, but...
As the great constructor of the current way of life in Iriel, which is thriving, probably unlike anywhere else in the world. The dragons also defy a certain part of the general D&D canon, which is chromatic versus metallic.
Yeah, no, I just completely ignored that because I'm like, why would the color of their scales make them evil or good or vice versa? They're just chill.
Just the simplicity for old-time gamers who are just like, okay, what am I allowed to kill?
Yeah, but this isn't your grandpa's D&D. We're doing it cool now. The future is now, old man.
No, that's honestly how I think any of the D&D canon should be treated. Take the bits that you want, leave the rest, just like your salad bar.
Yeah. I mean, any dragon has the potential to be good or evil. The reason why there are less dragons outside of Iriel is because, generally speaking, if a dragon is burning villages and causing chaos, they'll just get excommunicated by all the other dragons off the island. Like, they won't be able to make a lair because all the other ones will basically bustle in and stop them. And,
they don't get together for much, but they've got this loosely affiliated pact with one another that they'll all honor when it comes to it being threatened.
Yeah. If someone is causing problems, they get kicked off the island, and that's why dragons do not have a great reputation everywhere else, because they're getting the worst of the worst. They're getting the opposite.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and you had said something, too, that sometimes bad offenders are even banished off plane.
Yeah, so the reputation is not great everywhere else because they're basically just sweeping them under the rug.
The rest of the universe is a dragon penal colony, basically.
Yeah. A lot of that stems from the idea that the island is the literal body of like the god of dragons. So that's like sacred turf, basically.
Gotcha. Yeah. That makes so much sense as a creation myth too. That really harkens back to like a lot of like old civilization creation myths, Babylonian, Greek, of the entire world being the bodies of gods and fallen creators from the beginning of time, well before humans walked upon the earth. Stuff.
Yeah, that kind of idea also applies to the god of life and death, because that god doesn't actually have like a physical form. The belief is that the continents are pieces of his body that have like laid to rest.
Oh, that almost sounds Osiris like Osiris' story where he was cast asunder. That's interesting. Yeah. What are some of the mythological inspirations that you really felt like you took from?
A lot of it comes from Greek mythology, just because it's the mythos that I was most familiar with when I was starting to work on this.
If you check out Ares' art, that's going to make total sense to you. Real Greek gods and goddesses. There's a lot of that vibe to me with your art, just like the flowy clothing and stuff. You know.
Thanks. Yeah, I love me some flowy clothing. The Pantheon is the part that I actually worked on first before I did any actual like map design or structure, because gods are basically some of my favorite things to play with in D&D. I love god tier conflict, and I love all of that like high tiered nonsense and the ripple effects that it causes.
Yeah.
So
gods being somewhat less than perfect as people, and the ripples sort of spreading out through creation and causing all kinds of shenanigans that our great heroes have to deal with.
Yeah, and like Greek gods, these gods like to meddle. They like to meddle a lot. They like to take human form or something approximating it all the time, and it causes a lot of problems.
And your dragons seem to spend a lot of time in their human form as well, which I think gets rid of a lot of problems that you would otherwise have in a world where humans and dragons constantly interact.
Yeah. I mean, I know that like I was reading like, oh hey, dragons can shapeshift or whatever, and I think the monster manual. It's like, yes, but people don't use that as often as I would like. I'm gonna take advantage of this.
And I love it because they take a form that's not exactly human. They take a form that's like, you can tell that it's a dragon, it's just the humanoid form of the dragon.
Yeah, if you know what to look for. Like some of them look more like tieflings, some of them look more like elves with horns. But they're all tall, and they tend to have like, colors that match their scale colors, like either in their hair or in their skin.
A little aside, imagine how the Hobbit would have been different if Smaug could do that.
Oh god, the Rule 34. Oh god.
Yeah, no, oh wow. Okay, yeah. No, I forgot about that part. You have to understand, I'm a pure little cinnamon bun. I don't know any of these things.
Good. Yeah, good. Dragons, it's also a lot easier for half dragons to be a thing when they shapeshift a lot and they take form a lot. Same goes for the gods, because I love Aasimar. They're some of my favorite, that's one of my favorite races in the game to play.
Yeah.
So having different kinds of Aasimar and having that be like more common and having different ways for that to come about, aside from just a god touches you one day and says you're destined to do cool things, or your god dad slept around a lot. I like there being different ways for that to happen. So having the gods meddle a lot means that there's a lot of different variations thereupon that you can play with.
Yeah, and if you think the whole elf and human lifespan thing is sad when it comes to relationships that they have, imagine being a god and falling in love with this mortal.
Yeah. Some of the gods are more well known for that sort of thing. Like the goddess of the oceans, she has a lot of children. Same with the god of passion and emotions, which makes sense. There's 2 homebrew races that I've made for 5e that are specifically descended from the goddess of the oceans, Tepeta, and descended from the god of emotions, Hallen. So they've become their own thing that's not Aasimar, but not human.
That's interesting. Yeah. So Aasimar is just more like your your basic celestial angelic sort of thing, and now you have these custom ones for like Percy Jackson rules, you know?
Yeah, kind of. You'll
Yeah.
have certain conventions that pop up in them specifically that you wouldn't see in a normal Azamar that like identify them. All of the children of Hallen are called Ignari. They have like orange or bronze or like marble like skin. They tend to have like they look kind of like fire genasi. They'll have like flames as part of their hair or in their eyes and things.
Mhm.
And they all have 6 arms. So that kind of
Whoa!
that kind of gives the game away.
All right, can I take the sextuple wielding feat?
I had to put something in the homebrew that was specifically like, yes, you can use an object or turn, but you can't make extra attacks.
Yeah. You just
Because
rule that out as being like having multiple weapons and multiple arms. They kind of get in the way of each other. So the mechanics even out to, yeah, sure, go ahead, throw a sword in each and every arm. You're going to hit 1/6 of the time.
yeah, they're also empaths because they're descended from the god of emotions.
Mhm.
Which means that you can tell where one is because they tend to leave disaster in their wake a little bit.
Hey, that's how I play Fire Genasi. So, mhm. And the other one, that's Howlin to
Yeah,
Tepeda.
Tepeta. She has a lot of children.
Well,
She has a lot of
every
children.
every sailor brags that their first love is the sea. So,
Oh yeah, absolutely. She's the goddess of a lot of things. She's the goddess of chaos, magic, storms, the ocean.
mhm.
Uh, some people believe that she's the goddess of the moon. That's not 100% accurate, but you know, mythological things get weird in a world where the gods actually exist. But yeah, her
Absolutely.
children, they're called storm children, storm daughters, storm sons. There's a couple of names for them, but
Mhm.
water genasi turned up to 11. They're like they also tend to have like more like fish features.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, Tepeta's also supposed to be the mother of the first mermaid. So all mermaids and merfolk and marish, depending on what you call them, because there's a lot of names to them too,
Of course.
kind of consider her like the patron, the mother, the guiding figure. Same as sort of like the way that Drow in Forgotten Realms see Lolth, minus the fear for their lives.
Yes, yeah. I mean,
Mostly.
mostly. I mean, she is a goddess of the ocean and chaos, so there's a certain element of that, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm
she's
sure
a little
that
two-faced.
you got the nurturing aspect and also the will fuck you up aspect.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh goodness, I had a question. Oh yeah, that actually though that has a lot of real world antecedents as well because you know a lot of times, particularly over time, old lineages of rulers in Rome or in Egypt would start to talk about themselves as though they were descended from the gods, and so I
Yeah.
think that's a pretty identifiable motif that you're working off of there.
Yeah, you know, very I am Pharaoh, I am the sun and the moon.
Exactly. But once again, it kind of turned up to 11 because this is a world where the gods and the goddesses are confirmed to exist and all the atheists are in danger.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not gonna make it very far without your without at least a little bit of faith.
There is one thing that I noted down that I wanted to talk to you about specifically because I know it's something that you put a lot of thought into and it's something that you're particularly proud of. And that is your setting's take on the Feywild.
Ooh, yes, this is a good one.
Yeah,
I cobbled together a lot of stuff that I know about like Fae and other books and other sources in like from what I have heard in actual like I believe in Celtic mythology. So there's a lot of influences from multiple different areas, but the Fae, they're scary. They have a lot of power.
they
They're
are.
sort of
Yeah.
isolated. They're quite isolated from like the gods and the mortal realm. Basically, only tethered by the fact that their realms very splintered, and the fact that they cannot lie. Also,
That's
that they
beautiful.
have to keep the promises that they make.
Now, the Fae have a reputation for being manipulative, and I like that as kind of an
Mhm.
origin for that. If they are physically, magically incapable of lying, there's some sort of geisha on them for that. It makes sense that they would have to really step up their game to be able to avoid, like, to make loopholes in that. Like, I didn't technically lie to you, which, once again, very mythic. Celtic tales. I'm reminded of some old folk tales of leprechauns specifically, how they would,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, leprechauns would definitely be like a good comparison, being like tricky little bastards who get what they want through careful wording.
Like most interpretations that I have seen of the Feywild fall somewhere on a scale between the darkest of Celtic mythology, like fairies stealing children away and eating them, and
Yeah.
on the other end of the spectrum, Lisa Frank.
There's a little bit of the Lisa Frank stuff just because Fae are, especially in like the way that they're described in the book, they're like creatures of pure emotion. They tend to go from 0 to 100 and back to 0 again quickly.
Yep, it's a charisma-based land, really. Yeah.
Yeah. They're very chaotic, and they fly by the seat of their pants a lot, and that causes a lot of problems for anyone who gets caught up in that, because if a Fae wants something, they're gonna get it. If a Fae wants to do something to a person, there's very little that they can honestly do to stop them outside of somehow outwitting them.
The entire plane is basically a reality show.
Yeah, it's just Big Brother.
Yeah.
Big Brother house, where they know what's going on.
Mm-hmm. It's once again that almost godlike interplay of personalities that are just kind of shaping the world around. They're petty, and it's not the sort of thing that the average person is concerned about. Yeah, but it affects their lives anyway because these are beings of power.
Yeah. The only things that are really keeping them from outreach outside of the Feywild is, because the Feywild, the way that I have set up, is very specific. Because you have your 4 seasons, your 4 seasonal domains, but the actual Feywild is not one plane or 4 planes. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of demi-planes, like bubbles, that are stuck together or overlap. And you cross from bubble to bubble as you move through, and each one is claimed by a specific season. And it's not coherent, really, because you could step through a ring of mushrooms in summer, and you could just walk into winter, and then walk into fall, and then walk into another fall domain, and then walk into summer. And they're constantly switching hands, too, between the Archfey, because they like to barter for power between each other. So it's never consistent which bubble is which either, which makes travel very difficult.
And all of that is just so incredibly evocative to me. It's a land of chaos. It's a land of big personalities doing big things for selfish reasons.
Yeah, you have your 4 Archfey constantly like, well, I'll give you 2 of mine if you give me 2 of yours, and to like try and get the better parcels of land for themselves, or they'll trade livestock, which are mortal creatures often, with each other in order to like scoop up prize pieces of domain. And it's very much like this dick measuring contest between them.
Yep. No. It's that just screams Fey to me. Like I feel like I have never run a game that particularly involves the Feywild, but I feel like if I do, I'm going to take some cues from you on that one, because I think you really it was quite masterful.
I don't like the idea of like a campaign being like, here's the Fae, they're good, because that doesn't really line up with anything.
No, they can be good. But they're even the good ones are of this sort of like, it's this third axis. It's not even like it's necessarily chaos and law. It's a little hard to define. And I think the Fae should be hard to define. They're kind of these alien entities almost. They're very different. Yeah. Their values are different. Their logic is different. And I think you really captured that.
Thanks. You went to, in my campaign, to like basically their midsummer ball, and it was a little weird.
Yeah, it's like Homecoming, but all of the teenagers have mind exploding powers.
Yeah, because all of a sudden you guys are sitting at an auction table watching like real human beings being sold off to each other to the highest bidder.
Yeah, and it's like something that was understood and ritualized by these Fae. And of course, like I love the way you just snuck it in there. Like I Adam was waiting for the shoe to drop the entire time. My character Ket had no idea that was coming. She was floored. It was horrifying. It was like, because it's up until that point, I think in your campaign, things had been relatively accommodating. We'd been traveling along. We hadn't really had too much that had, I don't want to say without challenge, because it was not without. It's just it was less confrontational. It was more
You
about,
dealt with a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of how do
yeah.
we get from point A to point B in the right span of time. There wasn't a lot of like, oh god, we're in trouble.
But suddenly, one of our own has suddenly, like, by saying the wrong thing, more or less, in front of an archfey. And it wasn't really anything that we could have seen coming beyond knowing what we know about the Fae. That we know that they're tricky like that. And then he got himself captured. And he basically, according to the logic of the Fae, which was not our logic, he basically gave himself up to be sold. These Fae, they buy and sell mortals, like they're tokens, like they're playthings, and that's sort
Yeah.
of that's part of the horror of the Fae is the inhumanity.
Yeah, I wanted the exclusive holofoil of Civilian so that I could
Yeah.
so I could eventually trade it off to someone else's collector edition collection.
Exactly, yeah. No, it's like, wow, all right, what is this priced in the Topps guide, you know? I mean,
He thought he was being so slick too.
yeah, he did. Oh, you can't outslick the slickster, I guess.
Yeah, that was a very fun section of the game.
It was very harrowing. I believe, yeah. What ended up happening, and this was a little while ago now, so I'm having a little bit of trouble remembering. Ket panicked, and it's always great when Ket panics because Ket is usually very calm and cool, very smart, very calculated. She's an artificer. She's an intelligence main, and she panicked and she offered herself up in place.
She auctioned off something, she didn't know what. She was basically just like, okay, I need to make a bet that will outbet everyone else so that we get our friend back, and she just kind of blurted out something that she didn't know what she was paying. So
yeah, something, because she doesn't speak Sylvan, but she was listening earlier, and of course she is a Kenku, so she has that capacity to mimic words exactly. So she mimicked a word that she had heard somebody offer as their payment. It wasn't for gold. People weren't bidding gold. They were bidding things that our characters didn't understand, and what Ket ended up giving to the Archfey of Summer, quite likely the big bad evil guy, or one of the big bad evil guys that we were dealing with, her heart.
yeah.
And it's like a question of what does that even mean to a Fae?
Yeah,
you know?
it's got physical and metaphysical layers to it, and I'm not going to elaborate.
Yeah. Because it's still you've still got that hanging over my head. Adam is fully expecting that to come crashing down at some point because we still have not had any kind of like final encounter with this dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ket offered her heart in return for her friend's safety.
Next time on Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And oh god, it was just like really good. There's a trap you can fall into where you just play the Feywild and the Fae as just being particularly snooty elves. And
yeah, I wanted to stay away from that.
I think you stepped around that perfectly.
Yeah, this would be so much harder too if it wasn't like a text campaign, because I've DM'd a decent amount, but if it was like an in-person over the voice, I'm not the best narrator, so there would have been a lot less trickery, and it would have been a lot like
there's definite benefits to it being a text game. We were able to get so much deeper into stuff, and we're able to split the party without people feeling particularly like they were just showing up and watching a show instead of playing a game. Because people were at work, they weren't always posting. So
I gotta say, as a person with ADD, doing it all via text and being able to go back and read the things that you wrote, beneficial, because I am a chronic note avoider. I don't take notes.
I'm hoping that this is a bit of a side note, but I am hoping that at some point in the future, what we can do is, I want this to become a thing. If people have text games that they can, like, I don't know, port them to AO3 or something like that, and people could just read the text game. I think that would be really cool. I would love to read people's text game.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
So if you have a Discord bot or something like that that can export the text of your text games, and you do that, you are my friend now.
Yes. Please introduce yourself.
So we're coming around to a point where I would like to roll on the random questions table.
Oh boy.
Do you have a D100 or percentile dice that you have?
Not on hand. I could just
Not on
pull
hand?
one up online, but I feel like you'd want to see the numbers.
No, I'm not worried about that. You don't have the chart. You don't know what you're getting. You can just tell me. I trust you to roll a D100, Aries.
All right. I rolled the D100 and I got a 3.
You got a 3?
Yep.
All right. So this question comes from Emma Sleepy Sheep on Twitter. Number 3 is, what religious system is most prevalent in your world and why?
Religious system. A lot of the gods don't really have much centralized like worship. There aren't a lot of hierarchies. Aurora would probably be the closest to having like a strict religious hierarchy of any kind because they are technically a theocracy.
Mm-hmm.
They have a representative from each of the main 5 gods, which we call the pillars. And those representatives tend to make all of the decisions for all of the areas of Aurora that they have control over, which is not all of the continent, but a decent chunk of it. That'd be the closest to like an actual like organization. For the most part, the gods basically just dictate to their followers, hey, I want a temple here because there's a power source that's useful, or there's a decent amount of my worshippers here. They export to where they need to be.
Gotcha. Yeah. So it's not like one all, even though the gods exist, it's not like one all-encompassing religion.
No, yeah, it's very dependent upon where and like what they're trying to accomplish. Like in the game, again, you bumped into a follower of Myos, who's the god of like youth and innocence and fertility, and they were setting up a new chapter of their temple, basically because they wanted to have more spots on the continent for her worship so that they could draw more people into worshiping her.
Gotcha.
So it was beneficial for them to set up an outpost, basically, so that they could start connecting the dots.
So the religions or the followers of the individual gods are maybe a little bit in competition with each other as per human nature.
Yeah, there's some competition, although for the most part, they managed to avoid all-out holy war. Yeah, there's a lot of minor gods and 5 big ones. So the minor gods, they tend to orbit around each other, but the big gods, they tend to work together.
That's good. That's a good thing for the world as a whole. I was going to ask you, how do the gods themselves feel about this competition? Are they like, oh, my followers are cooler than yours? Or are they like a little embarrassed by it?
It depends on the god, but yeah, you know, they could chill up in the clouds and have a little bit of a dick wagging contest. And I mean, it depends on the god a lot because
very much so. Yeah, I can see that.
Some of them are more eager to get their hands into more oil than others. One of my favorites is the god of trickery, Seno, who absolutely loves showing up in the most baffling places and just slightly course correcting according to what he thinks would be fun.
I was reading a thing the other day. It was about trickster gods in general in culture, in actual like human real world culture, and how they're almost a class of deity unto themselves, which is to say, like, not gods per se. It's because of how closely they tend to interface with the human world. Trickster gods are, by this notion, by definition, the envoys between the deific realms and the mortal realm. So yeah, I feel like they're pretty commonly the ones who are more likely to get up to their elbows in human affairs.
Yeah, and his thing is like little nudges that cause big problems, very butterfly effect.
Yeah.
One of the campaigns that I ran, and this was a while ago, he was the instigator because he basically looked at these different points in time and found a way to line up 5 or 6 different people where he could basically pull them out of the place they were in into one spot, pull them all together, and in doing so, it would just cause all of these massive butterfly effects just by virtue of what the person was doing in all of these other planes of existence, just for the fun of it.
Basically ripping the rug out from under reality to see what happens.
Yeah, there was a pixie in the Feywild who had just been about to encounter basically the wishing stag, and because he pulled her out before she got there, a hag got a hold of the wish instead.
Whoa!
Yeah, because of the timing. In the Shadowfell, one of the guards of the Raven Queen got pulled out right before she was attacked by, some upstart adventurers, and the timing of that led to the Shadowfell starting to implode. It was that happening in multiple places at once. And the premise of the campaign was basically, okay, you 6 idiots, you're in the desert, you've been pulled here by Senno, you gotta figure out what the heck just happened, and please go unbreak your realms of existence.
That's an outstanding premise for a campaign. And I feel like it also, like, low-key really sidesteps the main issue of how do we get these idiots together.
Yeah, I also, it was very personalized to the players, because I was like, pick a realm of existence, make your character based off of that, I will go from there. Yeah, as in this case, it was the gods literally shoving them into a room and putting them in the get-along shirt.
The get-along shirt. Did he have plans for them in particular, or did he just... I assume that, he doesn't just want to, like, kill people and strike them down for his mischief. He just wants to, like, put them in a place where they're out of the way and then just watch what happens to the world without them.
Oh, he just wanted to sit back with his bowl of fantasy popcorn and just watch.
Yep, very nice. So was he expecting them to do anything, or just to kind of languish in that desert until, he did something?
I wasn't sure, honestly. He just wanted to see what would happen.
Mm-hmm.
He also threw a dragon at them.
I like this because it's like, you say he threw a dragon at him, like, okay, they encountered a dragon, or did he just, like, step into existence and go, yeet?
He picked the place that they wound up, and he was like, oh, this could be interesting. Yeah. If you ever actually saw him in the game, which you did not, he doesn't look like the god of trickery either.
Yeah, I mean, what better for a god of trickery to look like than not a god of trickery? That just seems fair,
He's like a fat old man with a really nasty beard who chills in like a basically a fold-out lawn chair wherever he wants to watch the chaos unfold. He just looks like Santa on a vacation.
What part of this world would you say is, like, the most you? Like, what has, like, the most defining touches of you as a person?
I talked about my monster guild before, but that's the part that probably hits closest for me. And this is based in Ayano, like right in the center of the kingdom. But it's Malice's Motley Monsters, the guild, run by Malice, the tiefling, who basically has a underground network where he collects weirdos and outcasts. The guild is supposed to be a safe haven for people who are largely rejected by, like, outside society, and it gives them, like, a stable source of income, a place to sleep, food to eat, a community.
Yep, I love that because, yeah, like, I've played around with those themes myself.
And that's the first campaign that I ever GM'd, was Malice's Monsters. It was pretty much just, I want to be able to play anything in this campaign. I want you players to be able to play literally anything you want. What better way to do that than to be like, it's monster themed in both the literal and metaphorical sense.
Ares loves their monsters. Okay, you listening public, yes. If you were to understand anything about Ares, it's monsters.
Yeah, I can appreciate it. Guillermo del Toro was onto some things.
Would you like to roll another D100? We can do one more question, I think.
Hell yeah.
Okay.
I'll roll another D100.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for a 3. Oh no, 42.
42. Life, the universe, and everything. Fantastic. Let's see what we got. Okay. This one is from Star Shinobi on Twitter.
Ooh. Yeah.
What aspect of your world did you create and just want to discuss that rarely gets asked about by your players? As GMs, we set the lore, and the lore is there if the players want to engage with it, but they don't always, because they have their own pursuits, and their characters already understand the world, even if they themselves, the players, don't. So,
okay. Well, one of the things that I've never really gone into big detail about is basically there's this historical figure named Portia, who the capital city of Iano is named after, not because everybody liked her and she was save the day, but because Portia is this like really important like figure because she's the only person who ever almost conquered the entirety of Ayano by herself.
Oh, okay. The
She
Alexander the Great, yeah.
Yeah. Like she had an army, but she basically waltzed straight to the center of the continent, to the mountain in the very middle where the capital was, and very, very nearly became a grand total great dictator.
Wow.
She was badass. But the city is named Portia basically because she was ousted from the city, and they named it after her post the city having a different name as a like, yeah, she couldn't take this city. You try it.
Oh,
it's basically
that's
a middle
ballsy.
finger.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
Not because they like her, but because they were basically just like, we beat her. We're cool. Take us on.
Yep.
The city's in a super defensible position too, because it is literally the exact center of the entire kingdom on a giant mountain built into the rocks. So it's
well, if you're gonna build a defensible city, mountaintop is a good place to start.
Yeah, no, it's very Minas Tirith in that way. You very, very nearly met the guy who stopped her, and I keep going on about this just because I'm like, you didn't touch the magic sword.
Cool Sword Will is out of the story, from what I understand, unless there's a chance of him coming back.
Yeah, he bounced. He went home.
So I don't mind spoilers on that front. That is very cool. So, what, an ancient general?
Ancient Asmar, actually.
Ancient Asmar?
Yeah, Tapetta's champion. His name is Akius. He is a half-orc Asmar who was her greatest champion in life. And after he defeated Portia, he disappeared. No one was really sure what exactly happened, but basically the idea is that in order to actually defeat her, he was trapped in his own weapon. His own sword.
Oh, and that's where Will's cool sword came from.
Yeah, so cool. Now it's like a whole thing that Tapetta's worshippers will take the sword to whatever her most defended temple is, and they'll keep it there until they have a better position to put it in, and then they'll like basically pilgrimage. They'll pick a champion, and they'll have them take the sword to wherever they plan to move it next.
Well, that explains why he kept quiet about the whole situation.
Yeah,
we knew there was something going on with the sword, but we didn't know exactly what.
Yeah, no one's really sure how to get him out because no one's really sure if he'd have a physical body when he gets out. And he can still communicate from in the sword. He's fine with it. It's a cool sentient weapon, and no one's ever actually gotten to the point in a game of mine where they've like talked to the guy who saved the world. Yeah, supposedly Tapetta has a plan to release him at a specific time and a specific point when they need him most, but that hasn't happened yet. Like
an Arthurian once and future king sort of thing. He'll come back when he's needed.
I get broad strokes. There's not a lot of like super cool mythological things that I have like detailed out very harshly.
Well, I mean, you got to leave room. You got to leave blank spaces on the map to fill up as the situation dictates.
Yeah, there's very few like iconic heroes or whatever because I want my players to be those iconic heroes. The only ones that I have Akius, I have Malice, and the guy from the dragon thing, Arkin. Yeah, and one day, Ket.
One day, Ket, yeah, will be the legendary hero. Everybody will remember the many exploits of Ket Two Whistle, or as she pronounces the last name,
Toot toot.
Toot toot.
I love Ket so much.
I mean, you put a lot of thought into your NPCs. I can tell. Like, there's a lot of
them are just kind of pulled out of nowhere.
It feels like there's a lot of love there. Like, they all feel like they have like these backstories and they're just like they're not just sitting in an airship bay waiting for the adventurers to come along. They have places to be and things to do. Yeah. We've just happened to bump into them. And
I want to have like non-conventional things pop up, like when you guys are in the airship and it's like, oh, is this your child? No, it's our baby sister.
Because the world is messy. It doesn't conform to like your like weird sitcom-esque preceptions about how people are.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking about it from the logic of like, well, what person doing here? They've got their own thing going on. So like you're hanging out, waiting in line in Maelstrom, and there's like these mermaids who are like basically profiting off of all these people who are standing conveniently close to the canal.
How do the people in the world react to the events that are happening in the world? Yeah. That's the key to making it a living world, you know? I mean, it's not just people waiting for stuff to happen to them. People have ingenuity. They do stuff like that.
Yeah, you guys poof off the face of the earth for 3 months, and obviously when you come back, it's not like everyone's like Bethesda style idling around in their home city like, oh boy, I can't wait for the characters to show up again. Things
Just
happened.
sitting there T-posing while you're gone.
Oh man, although I'm really glad that I did this over text because I can't do the voice tooth for any long period of time, and you want to know why? Because in my head, she's just like, "Hey, sit down, have some baked goods. Are you eating enough? Yeah, we're gonna sit down, and I'm gonna make you some cake, and I'm gonna complain about things to Amphitrite in a language that you don't understand. It's fine. And I'm gonna go yell at Snow because he's being an immature baby about this whole thing. You get a little cursed, and all of a sudden, your whole life is thrown up." I just like my weird NPCs, and it's just fun to be able to talk about them.
Oh, I love that dynamic so much, though. A dragon who has been cursed into human form, and the only person who will look after him is like they have such an uncomfortable relationship, but it's just so endearing because, like,
she doesn't put up with his shit. Yeah, they've been neighbors for centuries. She kind of knows what he's like.
Part of me is just like, oh my god, now kiss. But yeah.
Yeah, they're bicker like an old married couple.
Exactly. You know.
Yeah, and of course, you guys had to go and seduce at least one NPC, and it was the one that I don't always do this, but it was one of the ones that I rolled on appearance and name, and it's just like, god damn it.
Really? Huh?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known.
I was like, yeah, I told preschool this a while ago. Preschool's the player. Yeah, for Mr. Cromwell, I was like, okay, I need an NPC, and he needs to be a shady criminal type who asks you to do this quest for him. He was the most like sus guy on the planet. It's just like you go into a building and you meet up with this guy, and he asks you to sign some papers before he'll explain what he wants to do, and he needs you to help him guard a shipment out of town.
And the preschool was like, "Yep, I'm into that."
Honestly, I think the reason why that all started was because I was like, elf. He also has a tongue ring, and instantly it was just like, oh, you say? Piercings. That's how I do it. That's how
we like ourselves a bad boy, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, and you guys, none the wiser, helped this guy pull off a massive scam and cross over before this embargo went in, and it's like, well, you didn't technically commit a crime, you didn't lie.
I love that the closest thing that Ket had to a romance was the Archfey of
Spring.
The Archfey of Spring. I almost said fall, but I'm like, that's not right. Hold on. Yeah, Ganymede. Yeah.
Meaty liked you, fine. It's just like, oh, this mortal is interesting, and they helped me out of a tight spot.
Mm-hmm. And of course, like, Ket's entire storyline is about coming out of her shell and learning how to handle herself in the real world after being an academic for her entire life. So and it really was a great moment for her.
Yeah, it's just like, wait, birdhead.
Yep. Yeah. Oh boy, that was great.
And Archfey don't have as much control over how they look as the gods do, but you know, he's also baby. He's baby Archfey. He's still learning how to do it.
Yeah, he's not as awful as some of the others. So
he and Winter are probably the good ones.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And even then, Winter like abandoned of existence for a couple centuries.
Yeah, I'm very interested in that. I was like, that's one of the things that I wrote. That's in the lore document right there, and I'm like, you have all of these like half-formed plots, like these clear hooks of things where if we were interested in it, we could look into it and maybe find something out. And it's just like, man, I am interested in that, but that has nothing to do with what we're doing right now. So like, it sticks in my head. You know?
Yeah, because like Luthariel's like probably one of the more benevolent ones, but at the same time, she just completely yeeted out of her realm and left baby Archfey to be in charge of 2 domains at once, and that didn't really work so well because poor boy.
Yeah. And with the other Archfey constantly trying to manipulate their way in, I'm sure that was I mean, that's the thing that
Yeah.
gets me. It's like it had to have been like it's a mystery, and like don't spoil me, but like she disappeared for centuries while like the Archfey are locked in this eternal battle for dominance over one another. What on earth or beyond could possibly make it seem like that was worth it to her? You know, it's intriguing. It's like, you know,
Yeah. But like from the perspective of the other two Archfays, they're looking at poor Meaty who's got 2 realms that he's gotta pay now, and they're
yeah.
just like, oh boy, why does mom let you have 2 wieners?
Okay, I think we're kind of well, let me see. We're at a little bit over an hour now. I wanted to know if you had any, I'm going to say that a little bit better. Yeah, do you have social media or creative products that you might like to shout out before we
You can follow me on Twitter at Aries_2256. That's where I do all of my best complaining and D&D splaining.
It's some top tier complaining. I have nothing to complain about with their complaining.
Thanks, I try my best. You'll see all sorts of monster propaganda on there. It'll be a good time. I tend to just retweet like crazy all of the cool stuff that I see and all of the cool Kickstarters that are popping up.
A monster positive account.
Yeah, and if you want to like
all right,
actually look at like my digital portfolio, I have a website. It's aries-2256.com. I haven't updated in a little while, but I promise you that there is art there.
Your art is fantastic. I especially love the outfits that you put your subjects in.
The secret is belts.
Yeah, the secret is belts. Final Fantasy has shown many times. The more belts, the merrier.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me on. Tell me about your game.
Yeah,
it's been a cool time. Inaugural episode.
yeah, anybody who listens to this podcast is going to hear about your world first. Isn't that cool?
Yes, please spam me with your questions. I will answer them all.
I kept getting messages from Aries. All right, they were like, we need to do this. Come on, we need to. I don't know why you sound like Rick from Rick and Morty. Come on, Adam. You gotta get
Adam,
in.
Adam, we gotta do the thing.
Get in here in the chat, okay? 20 minutes chat, okay? Really quick. All right.
I'm very enthusiastic about this, okay?
Yeah, no, and I appreciate it. It's nice to see people interested in it.
I apologize for sounding like a 14-year-old boy.
So do I. So here we go.
Oh man. 14-year-old boy squad, just minus the terrible quality Xbox headset microphone and people yelling racial slurs in the background.
Ma, bring my chicken nuggets! Come on, I gotta pull some noobs, Ma! Damn it, Ma!
Okay, but thanks for entertaining my whims.
Yeah, that's no. I enjoy your whims. What is this game but not enjoying one another's whims, right? All right, this has been Aries.
Hey!
I don't know how to end this. Bye. Emailed questions, comments, or interview requests can go to sohowwasgame@gmail.com. The intro music is Through the Woods We Ran by Vinsvept. Thanks for listening. I mean, did you see that original post? I was just like, maybe I'll start a podcast. I don't know. And then everybody was like, ah!